Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by gaslighting your coworkers. Yes, Becky, your desk has always been that height. Episode 277, Expo Launch Party with Doug Lowder and Gabriel Donadel.
Hey Mazen, do you know much about 3D printing?
Other than just sending my sketches to my brother to print for me, not much.
That's what I used to do. And now I have a 3D printer, meaning a person who 3D prints, in my house. My husband just got a fancy new 3D printer and has been printing all sorts of stuff.
That's awesome. What's your favorite thing so far?
My favorite thing is this awesome fidget, like desk fidget toy that's like, it's kind of like a switchblade, but it's plastic, obviously. And you like open it and then you like the blade comes out and you shut it and you do that just like over and over again. Yeah. And it's the most addicting fidget toy. Our editor, Jed, actually found the file for me and sent it to me. So he turned me onto it, but he would be pretty upset with me if I used it during the recording because it's not quiet.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun 3D printing everything we can think of, from like a fly swatter. My husband printed a fly swatter.
Oh, wow.
Literally. We've printed toys for the kids. He printed me a little ring holder. It's like all of a sudden this whole world opens up.
Yeah.
Where you're like, if you can imagine it, you can make it.
Exactly. Yeah. On my desk right now, I have two things he printed. One, it's like a little clip you put on your desk to hang your headphones on. So my headphones are always like hanging on them on the side of the desk.
Nice.
And then I know the listeners can't probably see this, but this is it kind of thing. It just
That's really useful.
Desk. And something else, which might make a lot of noise if I open it up, but it's bicycle holders. So it's like stuff we'll bolt onto the wall and like hang our bicycles on the wall.
Wait, you can do that with like 3D printed material?
Yeah. So
how is it strong enough?
Oddly enough, it's very tiny, but I'm not going to take it out of the bag.
Small but mighty, man.
It's just like a little cup the tires sit on, and then like another hook that just holds the top of the bike. It's very like minimalist kind of thing. We just redid our garage, and I'm trying to find out where to put the bikes. So he printed that, and then he also 3D printed another version of it where you get to hang them from the roof.
Oh.
It's a low roof, so I'm probably going to end up doing that until my son is tall enough to get to it, and then we have a problem.
I mean, he's small. He's young, but you're his dad, and you're really tall, so it probably won't be too long.
He's pretty tall. All the kids are like, "Are you in the right class?" But yeah. Anyway.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's the latest obsession around our house. 3D printing little gadgets. But let's get on with it. I'm sure our listeners came to hear about React Native and not 3D printing. I, of course, am Robin Hines. I'm the Director of Engineering here at Infinite Red and your host for the day. Jamin is in Poland at React Native EU, which is very exciting. He's not only attending, he is speaking, which we are super excited about. I think this episode will probably come out after the conference is over, but we'll have a special episode recapping the conference for you all. So make sure to check that out. So I live near Portland, Oregon with my husband and my two kids, and I'm joined by my extraordinary co-host, Mazen Chami. And we have two guests, Doug Lowder and Gabriel Donadel, who I'll introduce in just a second. But Mazen lives in Durham, North Carolina with his wife and his not a baby anymore. I need to change the notes. Our notes template says baby boy, but he's not a baby anymore. With his son. He's a former pro soccer player and coach and a senior React Native engineer also here at Infinite Red. We have two lovely guests today. Doug Lowder is a software engineer at Expo, working on Expo updates and React Native tvOS, and he's in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was previously at Salesforce. And fun fact, he spoke at the original Chain React conference in 2017, which is very exciting. I can't believe that was 6 years ago. Wow. It's been a long time. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Great. We also have Gabriel Donadel. He's a Brazilian software engineer that loves tinkering and bringing ideas to life. He works on the SDK team at Expo and is the creator of Expo Orbit, which we'll be talking about at some point today. Welcome, Gabriel. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Before we dive into our main topic for the day, I should mention that this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next React Native project, hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. Awesome. Let's get into our topic. Very exciting. We're going to be recapping the Expo launch party, which happened just a few weeks ago. A bunch of new things came out for the Expo platform, and we're going to talk all about it. But before we dive in, can you both tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you ended up at Expo, kind of what your story is?
So, as you mentioned, my name is Gabriel Donadel. I'm software engineer at Expo. I worked mostly on the SDK team, more specifically on Dev Client, and now more recently on Expo Orbit. Before joining Expo, I used to work at different companies that use React Native and Expo in their apps, but mostly on the consuming side of the product now. And one day in the last semester of college, I had some free time, decided to start more actively contributing to the open source community, give back to the community, help build this amazing stuff that is React Native. And that got me in touch with Nicola Corti and Luna from Meta. I eventually joined the React Native contributor Discord. And at the end of the year, when I noticed I was the largest outsourced contributor of React Native core in that year, that's like in number of PRs landed.
Wow.
And kind of at the same time, I noticed that Expo had this open position in their website. I had already met Brent and some other members like CMAC on Discord. So I scheduled the interview. I think things went well, and here we are.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would think things went well because here you are. That's really cool to see it happen so like organically just through the open source community. Doug, what's your story?
Well, as you mentioned, I was at the first Chain React, so you already know a little bit of my story, but I was previously at Salesforce, and at Salesforce, an engineer who was a friend of mine started showing me React Native back in 2015. We started building some demos showing that a lot of the Salesforce features in their web app could be also shown on a mobile device in React Native and be a lot faster. And then we had an interest in building a TV app specifically for Salesforce. And that's when I discovered React Native didn't have an Apple TV port. So I created one and managed to actually land it in the core repo. It's since been moved out into its own repo, which I maintain. And it also supports Android TV. So it's the React Native for TV. We just released the 0.72 version of that. So we're now even with React Native Core in terms of features. And then middle of last year, I decided to join Expo. I talked with them and I knew about some of the things that they were doing, but I learned that what they were doing was so much bigger than anything I'd been aware of and got very excited about it. So I joined in May of 22.
They're really doing a lot. Like just the rate that features are coming out is just amazing to me.
Other than just the rate of things coming out, the Expo's focus on developer experience, I think, is like second to none right now because you all are just making the experience so much more seamless. Chain React, we've talked about our Chain React app a lot, and I think that was probably my first full Expo experience from initting the app all the way to releasing it on the stores. And even just after that with updates and whether it's over-the-air updates or even just store push updates, those are very seamless and easy to do. So that's awesome that you guys are kind of focusing on all that.
Thank you.
Do either of you mind just kind of telling us the story behind the launch party? Like how did you guys decide on it? When did this kind of come about? Because we followed it on the day when it was happening, or the days when it was happening, and it was pretty cool to kind of see how you chose to dedicate time virtually versus a conference to kind of release all this kind of stuff.
I'd never really seen a company do something like this, and it was really exciting.
Neither had we, actually. This was new to me as well. I got to give credit to our, first of all, to our CEO, Charlie, who was basically trying to find ways, and we were all constantly trying to find ways to generate excitement about the company and ship features faster and do all these things. And Charlie heard about this concept from a company called Supabase. I can actually, let me copy the link here, who did this themselves. And you can look at there and see sort of what they created, and they give some of the reasoning for it. And we decided this would be a great concept for us.
Yeah.
And once we got into it, it turned out that we internally had quite a few features in the pipeline.
Yeah.
We all, as people do, tend to work on different things, but it was a great way of sort of having a funnel where we could all show what we were working on and do it outside of the usual Expo SDK release cycle. It became really fun. Of course, it means that you're shipping things that are not ready for production, and you have to be very clear about that. And let's be clear about that today, that this is all based on SDK 50 alpha work.
Okay.
So it's not, you shouldn't like put it in production apps, but it's a great way for us to make sure that things are working ahead of time. It's a great way for get customers excited about things and to try them out. So I'm just really jazzed about it, and I hope we do it again.
Yeah, you're just saying you're jazzed about it. I think it creates a lot of like buzz in the community, like, ooh, this is a cool new feature. Let me try it out. And you know, given the fact that it's still not production worthy, I'm sure people will then be more inclined to report like, hey, I found this little bug in Discord or whatever, and kind of get it fixed. Does the community kind of decide what features get released, or is this just more of you all had a pipeline of features getting ready to be pushed out there, and this kind of seemed like the right moment for those?
It's a mix. I actually was thinking about that question. So if you actually go to our to Expo GitHub and click on issues and click new issue, one of the choices you get is I would like to add a feature. And that takes you to a special website that's actually designed specifically for this. And you can see here that there's features that have been requested that are under development, and there's quite a few features that have been requested by the community that we actually have implemented. For example, M1 workers for EAS build, and quite a few other things. A lot of these ideas do come from the community. At the same time, we obviously have our own internal roadmap and a lot of ideas that we come up with on our own. And some of those are the ones that were actually launched at the launch party.
There's always stuff that we keep paying attention to the community. For example, the State of React survey last year, they listed a bunch of biggest pain points that we've been working on to make it easier to the community. So that's another resource that we have. And it's basically what led us to work on debugging, implementing this inspector protocol, things like styling and CSS features. So yeah, that's also one thing.
I always see that like a common theme in your new releases is developer experience, but I've also, in this particular launch party, it also seems like a lot of features are really making EAS and Expo more feasible for like large companies with large user bases. Has that been a consideration in adding features?
Absolutely, it has. We have customers that are enterprises and need those features. And we want any of our customers to be able to scale to that size, and to have millions or billions of users, and to not have any impediments that come from us. So we always think about scaling when we build our features.
We're pretty well aware of the concerns that these companies are having, because a lot of them are our clients. And when we say we would love to use Expo, they say, does it meet like all of these different requirements that we have? And with a lot of these launch party updates, a lot more of those boxes can be checked, which is really exciting to see.
So I think the burning question that we all have is, while the launch party was happening, was there an actual Expo party?
Yes, there was. For this, by the way, I want to call out our head of product, John Samp, who actually did a lot of the management of the rollout of this launch party, created a lot of the content and the blog posts, fun content surrounding this. And also Kim, who's our one of our lead people in terms of customer support. And he actually managed the Discord launch party meeting where we actually spoke directly with our customers and took questions. And we actually had, of course, we had a party around that. We had pizza. We had it all, just like you would expect.
I really hope there was pizza.
It was
maybe
great.
Some balloons.
It was absolutely great.
That's really good to hear. So let's get to probably what everyone has been waiting to hear. Let's talk about the actual updates that you announced during launch party. What I have here first is rollouts for EAS update. And Doug, I think that's maybe your area. Can you give me a TLDR about what this new feature is all about?
This feature is about rolling out an update, not to all of the devices that might be able to receive it, but to only a fraction of it. And this is useful for a couple of different use cases. One is when you think that you have a new feature that might not quite be ready for all of your users, and you want to have just a small fraction of them try out that feature and make sure that it's actually working as expected. This feature called Rollouts enables you to roll out an update, and it will actually specifically go to a fixed percentage of all the devices.
And you can specify that percentage, like
you can
as custom as you like. It could be like 1%, could be like 0.5%.
It could be 1%. It could be, yes, any percentage.
Yeah,
absolutely. So this is useful for those kind of use cases. Obviously, it can also be useful for A/B testing and other kinds of use cases that big companies have when they're trying to roll out new features and they want to make sure that everything goes as planned. And then we provide a very easy way in the CLI to turn off that rollout so that one of those updates goes out to everyone immediately after that.
Will you be able to have like visibility into the various branches that are deployed? Like I know EAS Insights is another thing that you guys just came out with, but will there be a way to sort of see how your new update is doing with any sort of analytics?
Yes, there will be. Obviously, this feature is still in development, so I can't really show you exactly how it's going to look when we're finally done with it. But yes, that you will be able to see all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, it feels like, this really brings EAS update sort of in line with other OTA services.
Right. This is one of the key things that our customers have asked for. And I think, going back to what enterprise customers expect, this is one of those things.
Yeah. Like when you have a user base of millions and millions, you want to be able to do it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next one that I have here is updates to JS API.
I did not work personally on rollouts, but I did work on that. So I can talk about that in a little bit more detail. EAS Update is designed really to be independent of the application JS code. Obviously, since it's replacing the application JS code, that's really needed. It needs to be pretty much completely independent of that and able to be independent of that for safety reasons. At the same time, the application JS code does need to know about what's happening in the update system. For example, it needs to know if an update is available. It needs to know if an update has been downloaded to the device, because in our system, once it's downloaded to the device, that is what will run the next time the app restarts. So it's very important that the app.js code know about all these things. And so we had some JS APIs specifically for that purpose, but they were not completely well suited for all the sorts of use cases that a customer might want. For example, I'll just give you an example of a use case like this. When I was at a previous company, the company basically had this sort of stuff that they put in all the laptops so that they could have control over them and sort of manage laptops, the usual thing that you would have. And one of the features they had was they would periodically update apps on the laptop. And the way they did it was not just sort of shove updates out there, but they would have a UI that popped up saying, "Oh yeah, this app has an update, and you need to update that, and you have you can dismiss this 3 times, but after that you'll have to update." But that's the sort of thing where you need a JS API in order to implement a feature like that. And there are plenty of customers that are going to need features like that, including phone customers. So, but the first thing you need is you need to have reliable information on what's happening in the native update system. And so for that, we built we built basically a state machine for the update system, which really, it's sort of informally existed, but we formalized the different states and the transitions. And based on that, the JS API can actually show you at any time exactly what's going on in the update system. And you can start that hook from any component at any time, and it will still give you the correct information.
One thing about this use updates hook is it does make the code much easier. I know in the Chain React app, we'll link it in the show notes, but one thing that I remember implementing was periodic checks for updates, right? It was like, okay, when the app comes back from the background, do a check. If the app is initially mounted, go ahead and do a check. And just random interval. I think those were only 2 intervals. I think there was a 3rd interval we wanted to do, but we kind of scratched that idea. This is great because like a user could be using the app and then you can kind of decide what UX you want around that. But it could be, scrolling through the app and then all of a sudden I get like a banner that pops in from the top and say, there's an app update available, tap here to implement it. And then that automatically kind of takes that in. So I think that's really good because, what if a user doesn't background the app in that moment? At some point, the phone might go to sleep. So that will trigger, but this kind of takes away all that complex logic from your application and takes it up a level higher. And I like that.
Yeah, that's a good developer experience improvement.
One of the things that I knew that customers would want this. So one of the things that I put in there was the last check time, the last time that you check for an update, which is turns out to make possible quite a few interesting use cases. And by the way, speaking of this feature, the demo that I built, I want to thank all of you at Infinite Red for the Ignite CLI, which is what I used to create the demo.
Oh,
it turned out to be very useful. Of course, I had to use the one that's still under development.
Expresso.
The shipping
Expo.
one is for the shipping one was for Expo 48, and
teaser, a little spoiler alert. We're gonna have that's actually in beta now, and actually might be released by the time this comes out. I'm not sure, but Ignite 9X, we call it codename Expresso, where it's like Expo, but it has rest in the middle, so it's Expresso.
Well, I got to say, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to work with the CLI. It was very easy to generate the app. I was able to use your generators to generate, the usual things, splash screens, things like that, and also some custom components. I had not worked with it for a while, and it's so polished now. It's just beautiful. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We appreciate
shout out to Frank Galise that's spearheading that project right now.
Frank, if you're listening, he's put so much time and effort and love into Ignite over the past year.
And he helped me personally when I had questions. So I want to also thank him for that.
That's awesome. I think the next topic here we have is SSO. So this is actually a really cool feature because now you guys are kind of bringing in the capability for enterprise to be involved in this project. So Okta integration, I think we're kind of seeing that a lot more with the larger companies wanting to use that. So that's a really cool feature. Gabriel, do you mind just kind of giving us a little sneak peek on this feature and kind of what it's all about?
Sure. This is something that we have been working for a while. And as you guys were talking before, it's something crucial for basically all big enterprise users. It's basically a requirement that most big companies will have to adopt a new technology. So we don't have any specific clients right now that have started using it. We are just about to release, but Okta is basically the the standard integration when it comes to SSO, and we're now happy to release it and to be available to any enterprise customer.
Yeah, I know from firsthand experience working with clients, and whether they're large or small, usually one of the big things is we'd love to use Expo, but
Yeah.
We use Okta and we need to be able to integrate in this type of way. And I know other things aside, talking about the specific feature, this is usually a blocker. And kind of having this feature now, you can be like, look, security wise, you're able to securely, have your SSO with Okta. You don't have to change anything on your entire structure. We don't have to rebuild this from scratch. It's all available in the right there with Expo, and that's great.
Yeah, I think one of the most important features for SSO is, for example, when you need to deactivate a user, and you can do that all through your whole company. So you would remove access from all different accounts, including your Expo account, and this is one thing that SSO enables it. So it's very valuable for large customers, managing everything from a single place.
Absolutely.
I got really excited, and when this was announced, I sent the link to the client that I'm currently working with like a ton of exclamation points, because they've been sort of having to hold off on using EAS like all in because of this. And so I was like, oh my gosh, look, SSO support now. So very exciting. We love to see it.
Yeah, it's a project that we really liked implementing, and we hope to add additional providers soon. We'll be posting a few things on our website when things are ready. But yeah, signing up for your enterprise plan right now will enable you to set up SSO. You just need to contact us, and we'll do the whole setup.
That's awesome.
Awesome news.
I think the next one, Gabriel, I don't want to steal your thunder here because this is a completely new feature, and since you worked on it, can you give us an intro into what Expo Orbit is and how it'll help our flow?
Sure. So Expo Orbit is this macOS utility menu app that allows you to make your development flow a bit faster. We know that we already have kind of optimize the whole flow on the CLI and everything. But when it comes to testing your builds and running things on your simulator and physical devices, this is one thing that you still had to do a bit of a manual labor of downloading the build, dragging and dropping it to your simulator. And so we basically decided to have this application that would allow you, with a single click from the website, run your applications from EAS or even your snack projects in your simulator instead of using AppDice, which sometimes you need to wait on the queue and it's just not so convenient.
Yeah.
So basically the idea is that with this menu bar app, you can list devices that are connected. You can connect your Android device and your iOS device wirelessly or via cable, and it also shows the list of simulators and emulators. You can start them. You can install and sideload apps on Android, for example. This is something that's very useful if you, for example, I just got an Android TV stick, and sometimes I want to sideload apps, so I just connect that to my computer, and I can do everything super quickly instead of running ADB commands and things like that. But yeah, these are some of the features that Orbit already provides to you. This has been released as an experimental feature, so the feedback from the community will definitely shape on what sort of features we'll implement. But things that you can kind of expect for V1, which will be released soon, is a deeper integration in the Expo ecosystem. For example, listing the most recent projects that you have created builds. So you could just with one click from the menu bar install the latest build or the latest dev client build in your simulators and do that throughout your company. So if one of your developers create a new dev build, all of the other ones would just click on the menu bar and boom, install in the device. So this is a quick summary.
That's amazing. That's actually really crucial, because you would have actually saved me at the beginning of Chain React having Robin ping me in Slack and be like, hold up, this doesn't make sense. why am I dragging and dropping an APK onto my simulator? Can we hop on Zoom and can you explain this?
To be fair, okay, I had come for until then, like I had done mostly vanilla React Native projects, and so I was used to like you run iOS and it like boots your simulator and like all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I have to drag something from the file system onto.
Yeah. And I do like that feature. It was just
very new to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I do like the feature, and it sounds like it's your development team or organization specific. So like if Robin creates a new build or a feature, I can just use this to pretty much check out her branch so I can do my own testing off of it instead of pulling down her branch, running a build, whatever your steps are and your commands are. Get that downloaded, drag it and drop it into your simulator. Now it just seems like one button essentially does the whole checkout, install, and putting on your device. I think that's really good. And again, you guys are still focusing on developer experience, and that's great.
And it's a very cool name, Expo Orbit. I like that.
Yeah, the original name was not good at all. We had a few brainstorms to get it. I'm very practical. So the original name that I suggested was Expo Menu Bar. Not good at all. But
hey, it's very descriptive. I would like. I know exactly what that does.
Expo Control Center or something, something really technical.
Yeah, right. There's the developer name, and then there's the marketing name.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially because this is still under like experimental phase, so we plan on adding more features, more integrations to make it even simpler to do things. So the idea is that the less friction a user has. So if the user only needs one click, that's the ideal scenario, and it kind of feels magical as the other things that we try to implement at Expo. So we're planning on adding the custom links on the GitHub bot that comments on your PR, for example, when a build is ready. So then just with one single click and things like that. Also, if any of you guys listening today have ideas that you would like to implement, you can go on Expo/Orbit. It's an open source project. We use React Native macOS for this. So it's very similar to things that we have already been used to. The whole JS stack's basically the same. And on the actual part that launches builds and lists simulators, we use PKG to generate a single standalone executable. So it's basically a built-in CLI. We already had the whole expertise of managing simulators due to Expo CLI and EAS CLI. So it was basically just a matter of creating a custom CLI internally for Orbit.
That's awesome. Is this only macOS specific? No Windows support?
So this is, so basically the idea for V1 is to have a very good experience for a user. So it has basically all the features that a regular user would expect. Once V1 is ready, is shipped, we have fixed all the bugs, then we'll implement V2, which adds Windows support, and potentially maybe on V3 Linux support. We know that a big chunk of our users use Windows, so it's important to support that as well. And it was also one of the reasons why we choose React Native macOS, because then we could just reuse a good chunk of our code using React Native Windows.
Right once.
So it's built in React Native, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was quite an experience,
That's great.
Right now, we don't have...
That's amazing. I really want to check that out just because there's not that many open source examples of fully fledged React Native macOS apps. And that'll be a really, really good example to learn from.
Yeah. I think it was a very nice experiment for me. I had to learn a lot of things to make that work, especially because, as you mentioned, there are not many open source applications that use that.
There's really not.
Yeah.
There's really not.
And it kind of required us to develop a bunch of the mobile, to develop a bunch of the native modules. Basically, there are no Windows managers libraries for React Native, and a bunch of apps need multiple windows, So, yeah.
So you had to make one?
Yes. A bunch of the basic features had to be built manually, but hopefully this might lead to more open source libraries regarding that. The code it's very minimal and should be simple to extract that into multiple libraries.
That's awesome. Like the fringe benefits of sort of like pushing the boundaries and like building something brand new is that you get all these additional tools that can be used for other things as well.
Now I got to wonder what Microsoft is doing to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Because they that's how they build a lot of their apps, and they must have solved the window manager problem themselves.
Yes. That's one thing. Most of the resources that you'll find online are from Microsoft, because Microsoft is basically the only big player that's using React Native macOS and React Native Windows at the moment. But yeah,
ironically,
yes. But unfortunately, some of those implementations are just not open source.
Yeah. So this is really, really, really good to see. We've got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to try to get through the last few of these. The next feature that we'll talk about, fully customizable builds on EAS build. This is an exciting one for me. I just recently spent more time than I'd like to admit troubleshooting builds on CI. That is a whole thing that is very annoying to deal with as a developer. So tell us a little bit about what customizable builds with EAS is all about.
This is one of those other things that enterprise customers are really going to need. Mm-hmm. Essentially, just to put it in a TLDR, we're trying to make your build so that you can manage it with YAML the same way that you would do GitHub workflow and actions. And there's couple of different use cases that we're thinking of. One is if a customer wishes to fully customize their build and have their own build steps. They can do that with this feature. But we also feel that more commonly, what will happen is that the customers will use the existing EAS build, but they'll change one of the steps. And so what we tried to do is to take our existing EAS build process, which already works very well, and break it up into its different component steps. So, you install the NPM modules, Expo pre-build, Fastlane, things like that. Basically break those up so that the user can figure out which steps they actually need, or if they need to change one of those steps or two of those steps, they have the flexibility to do that. Then we also are going to be providing the customers to be able to write their own build steps, having custom functions. So we're very, very excited about this. This was actually the number one topic when we had our Discord party. This was the thing that people were asking about the most. And we're internally very excited. I'm very excited about it. I intend to use this myself. So
I believe it. I believe it. I mean, if there's nothing that developers like more than control.
Yeah. Just think about what this will do for your testing strategies. This is, you can have complete customized flows just for testing your builds. And that's another big thing that, where you can do it with EAS build, but this would make it so much easier.
There's a really great quote from the announcement for this feature. At Expo, we know what we need to do to build Android and iOS React Native apps, and we handle all of that automatically for you. And in many cases, this is all a project ever needs, but not always. We love, Expo is really good at bringing the magic, it just works magic. And we love that. And so this is keep the magic, but you can get your hands dirty if the magic is not magicking. Exactly right.
So yeah, this is another one of these things that's definitely still in development, and probably some of the APIs and things are going to change before it gets released. But it already works, and people are trying it out and using it and figuring out exactly what we still need to do to polish it and get it out the door. Very, very exciting.
Yeah, cool. So another what sounds like a proof of concept alpha release feature is the Expo SQLite. I always mess that up. Expo SQLite integration with CR SQLite. First of all, can someone just explain what is CR SQLite? I assume it's not Chain React SQLite.
That's what we think of when we see CR.
It's basically seamlessly merging different copies of SQLite together.
Like Git.
Just like Git,
your data.
exactly. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. And it's designed to support applications, for example, where multiple users are working on the same data and need to merge their data together. For example, if a user is getting most of their data from a service at first, when they first start up an app, and then they make local changes, and then something else changes on the server side, this allows the changes coming from the server to merge seamlessly with whatever the user has done on their local device and vice versa. When I found out about the local first architecture, I started reading this link. Let's see, paste this in, because this is actually a really nice document. Very ambitious document, actually, I got to say. I've seen this concept before at previous companies. I heard it called cache first development. But this document goes way beyond that. The cache first thing is basically make sure your app works with just local data, even if the server can't be reached, and things like that, and just make sure that the UI is reading from the cache directly and not trying to always read from the server. That's a great thing, but this document is trying to solve a lot of other problems at the same time. The issue of merging different copies created on different devices of the same thing, making sure they're actually worried about ownership of data, making sure that you actually own your data so you still have it if somebody turns off your service. It's actually amazing to read, so I definitely would encourage everybody to check that out. And I'd like to hear what Gabriel thinks of this as well.
Yeah, I think especially when we're talking about day-to-day internet connectivity, when you are on the device, network can be spotty. Sometimes you just want to provide the best experience to the user. So you can't really rely on just waiting for a request to go all the way through. So I think this is the best way to achieve 100% local first UX for your users.
I can speak to this a little bit. Here's an interesting use case. Many years ago, I spent quite a bit of time in Antarctica. I was at the South Pole for twice for about a month each time, working on a physics experiment. We don't have time to get into all of the details of that.
That seems like a whole other episode. I'd love to talk to you about that.
It's fun, but it speaks to this in the sense that the satellites that you normally use to talk to people around the world, when you're at the South Pole, a lot of those satellites are only visible for a few hours a day. So most of the time you're working with local data only.
Yeah.
And your apps and your systems really have to be designed for that. And it's a much more serious thing there.
Yeah.
Than it is. And if you think about it, that's not that unusual. There are places all over the world that have spotty connections where apps really need to be designed this way. So if you're really designing an app that's going to scale and be used all over the world, you have to think about this very carefully.
Right. You can't just make the app unusable because you can't reach the internet. You have to, have a strategy. That's amazing.
As developers, I feel like our only and first use case is ping my API, get my data, pop it in some hook or whatever, and display it on my screen.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we forget about the offline mode. Not everyone has full Wi-Fi, full access to internet. And sometimes, I hate to say it, but here in Durham, if you have Verizon, good luck. You're not getting much data. Phone calls aren't coming through. You're not getting much data unless you're on Wi-Fi. So that whole local first, or even just calling it offline first is very pivotal. If you have a e-commerce app, you still want your users to be able to see their cart, some sort of UX, add some stuff to the cart, still be able to use your app to a degree. Of course, that final quote unquote execution you always need Wi-Fi for. But at the end of the day, being able to use your app. And at the same time, you mentioned CR, the whole combination of your data working with multiple data. That's very important. That's something we don't think about often because we're so focused on the back end handling the data. That's for back end team. We're front end. When you're ready for it back end, you can send it over to us in our API. It's very important to keep in mind.
anyone else besides me had to do testing of a phone app in an elevator?
I can't say that I've ever done that.
That was a thing in a previous company. We had to test all our work that we did, make sure that things still worked if you got in the elevator and your phone connection died.
I had to do Bluetooth where once it connected, I had to like run out of the room with the device and see what happens.
That's very similar. Yeah. Love that.
Well, we've got just a little bit of time left and one more thing to cover. Just briefly, I want to talk about the new DevTools plugins for Expo CLI. Can you give me a quick TLDR about what that is?
So that's something that we are very excited about. It kind of part of the transition that the whole community has been following regarding the deprecation of Flipper. This will be more relevant when when the community releases React Native 73. But we basically need the Hermes inspector to debug JavaScript. And that's something that we already fixed a couple years ago, adding the hotkey of J to the Expo CLI. Kind of at the same time, Kudo thought about integrating everything inside the CLI because it's just like in the web. It doesn't really make sense to download an external tool every time that you want to debug something so simple as just checking logs, inspecting your internet protocol and things like that. But when we reached out to the community with this feature, one of the biggest requests about no longer using Flipper was, what about my plugins? How can I inspect Apollo Store? How can I use Redux DevTools and things like that? We integrated with React Native DevTools as well, but plugins were still missing. Plugins are basically just a web-based UI, which is exchanging messages between the engine and the DevTools itself. So what Kudo had this great idea of implementing was basically just this inner layer. We are still relying on a bunch of patch packages to make it all work. But the idea is that on SDK 50, users will already be able to use this. It won't be released on the alpha, but will probably be available for testing at end of September.
Okay. That's really cool to see. I know anything that sort of helps developers get some sort of window into what's going on in their app. And I know with the deprecation of Flipper, there's going to be a big hole. I'm really curious how you're using Patch Package to accomplish some of this stuff. That's fascinating to me.
I mean, it's all open source if you want to check the specific details. But it's basically just because some things are specific to Flipper and we need to change it to work with Expo CLI. But yeah, it's basically just some monkey patching, changing specific lines for other stuff that would work in our tooling.
That's really awesome. I've never seen Patch Package used that way before, and we use it all the time for just like updating dependencies that like haven't had their upstream changes merged yet, or what have you. But
that's the same thing that we are doing, for example, on CR SQLite, because to make it work on Android, this is something that's already working on main and will be launched on SDK 50. But yeah, there are some just crucial differences that we sometimes need to patch before it gets upstream, so we can keep working on that.
Makes sense. I am really sad that we have run out of time and we have to wrap up. But this was really, really fun to talk to you guys about everything that happened in the Expo launch party. We will put links to everything that we talked about in the show notes. So definitely check those out. Before we wrap up, just really quick, what can folks kind of expect for all of these things that are still in maybe proof of concept or alpha? Should they be expecting them in SDK 50 or further down the line? What's kind of the future for these?
Several of them will be in the updates JS API. I can speak to that. Will be in SDK 50.
Yeah,
and several of the others are not, like, for example, rollouts and SSO and things like that are not actually tied to the Expo SDK specifically. They're from our service. And so they are basically just rolled out when they're ready.
CR SQLite will be on SDK 50. Same thing goes for DevTools plugins. Regarding Orbit, we'll probably launch V1 a bit sooner. But yeah, most of those things you can just expect to be launched around November-ish or end of November.
Awesome. Well, you can definitely keep tuning into React Native Radio. We usually do episodes about each Expo SDK release. So we'll go over what comes out in SDK 50 and let you know what of these launch party updates show up there. If you'd like to nerd out more about React Native, you can join our Infinite Red Slack community at community.infinite.red. We've got almost 2,000 React Native developers in there now. And then you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Robin_Hines. Mazen is at Mazen Chami. React Native Radio is at React Native RDIO. Doug, people can find you on Blue Sky. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I've on Fostodon and obviously on GitHub. So
all at Doug Lowder. And then Gabriel, people can find you on Twitter as well.
That's right. Twitter at Donadel Dev.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Doug and Gabriel, for joining us today. We had a great time talking with you. As always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartosky, our designer and social media coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. And thanks to all of you for listening. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To send us out, I do have a quick mom joke. If you aren't impressed with pictures of black holes, you clearly don't understand the gravity of the situation.
That's a good one.
That's courtesy of Mr. Darren Wilson. Thanks for the joke. We will see you all next time.
thank you.
Bye.